A new skyscraper concept could bring people to astronomical new heights. Cloud's architecture office has unveiled plans for a futuristic skyscraper called the Analemma Tower. The building would hover above the ground because it would be attached to an asteroid in space.
Look at this thing. This really puts the sky in skyscraper. A design firm now has come up with this idea for a floating skyscraper. There would be ultra high strength cable to hang that building from an asteroid.
Forcibly put into orbit around the planet. That, of course, means that your address could be anywhere on Earth, so actually physically hanging from a cable.
New York architecture firm has drawn up plans for the tallest building. You might have been expecting me to say the tallest building on Earth, but that's the catch. Cloud's architecture office says this tower would be suspended from a large asteroid that's placed into orbit above the Earth.
It's going to be lightweight, solar powered, and use water from the clouds. The skyscraper would always be moving.
Right, floating skyscrapers tied to an asteroid in orbit that would float majestically over New York, that you could only leave by parachute, that was covered by so many news organizations it beggars belief. Newsweek, Popular Mechanics, Forbes, The Independent, Business Insider, and so on. And God, did I get so many calls to debunk this crap. So let's start with the more obvious practical elements to this. Where do I flush the toilets? Where does the water go? Where the hell are you going to get your water from? Or electricity? Oh, but they're going to get the water from the atmosphere, right? Yeah, right. They're going to get all the water to water all the people in that entire skyscraper just from that little bit that dips into the atmosphere. Perspective time. About 30,000 people worked in the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. And you didn't water all of those people just by putting a water bucket on top of the skyscraper. And that was merely 100 or so stories high. This thing is thousands of stories high. And power.
Also, so is that the technology that they've kind of started to brainstorm with this. In order for this tower to get power, they would actually put solar panels in space.
Makes sense. You're pretty close to the sun.
That's where, yeah, there's...
Oh, they're going to do it by solar power. That's a neat trick until you realize that the International Space Station only has half a dozen people on it and needs this many solar panels. Where are their solar panels? I mean, hell, once this thing gets into space, and you got to bear in mind that there's only like 100 kilometers of this is going to be in the atmosphere. The remaining 30,000 kilometers of this is going to be in space. And it's going to have all of the problems of a spaceship. And you know what the biggest window in space is? It's on the International Space Station. It's 80 centimeters, almost a meter, a couple of feet, that sort of size. And it cost an absolute fortune.
The cupola is a pressurized module with 6 trapezoid side windows and a circular glass roof, giving astronauts unique panoramic views.
My name is Scott Kelly, and this is the cupola of the International Space Station. The cupola is a small module that provides us a vantage point to see outside of the space station.
The cupola structure was made out of a single forging in aluminum. This is quite of an achievement. This was a premiere in Europe, and this is something Europe should be very proud of.
I'm going to take the camera here and show you the different windows we have in the cupola. This is facing aft. You can see the rear portion of the back of the space station, the Russian segment.
Node 3 and the cupola are the culmination of years of development and construction by ESA and its contractors.
And of course, any failure in any of this structure basically kills everyone in the skyscraper who's not in an airtight compartment. Yes, it's outrageously dumb on even the most superficial levels, but it's also kind of dumb on almost every other level. I mean, what's that? It's going to be tethered to an asteroid in geostationary orbit. Well, that's a neat trick. I mean, let's just take a look at the big numbers. If you're in the asteroid belt, and just so we're clear, the asteroid belt is the region between the orbit of Mars and Jupiter. So let's just take the largest object in the asteroid belt, that's Ceres. To escape from the sun, from the orbit of Ceres, you need about 25 kilometers per second. If you're on the Earth, you need about 42 kilometers per second to escape from the sun. So, this being a state function and all, if you want to get from the Earth to the asteroid belt, you need a change of velocity, a delta V of about 17 kilometers per second. Bear in mind here, of course, that the speed of sound, the speed of a bullet, is about 0.3 kilometers per second. Or, conversely, if you want to get from the asteroid belt to Earth, you also need a delta V of 17 kilometers per second. And just to put that into perspective, escape velocity merely from the Earth, not including the Sun, is about 10 kilometers per second. And we need giant rockets to get tiny payloads into space. So yeah, changing orbit around the Sun takes crazy amounts of energy. So in this case, we're looking at delta V. So the energy is half mv squared. So ballpark numbers, to move just 1 kilogram, it's about the size of a bag of sugar or a 1 litre pop bottle or something. To shift merely 1 kilogram of asteroid to Earth orbit will take about 150 megajoules. Now ballpark numbers, that's the same energy as 50 kilograms of TNT, and that's just to move a 1 kilogram rock from the asteroid belt to the Earth. And that's assuming a perfect conversion of energy to thrust. In reality, you'd be lucky to get half of that. But honestly, with equations like this, a factor of 2 really makes no difference whatsoever. So let's take a small asteroid, say 1 kilometer in diameter. So if we were to zoom in to Central Park in New York City, the entire asteroid would quite happily fit inside Central Park. So we're not going to worry too much about the actual exact shape of the asteroid. We're just going to approximate it to a sphere with a radius of about half a kilometer. So the volume of that sphere is 4/3 pi r cubed, about 500 million cubic meters. And a cubic meter of rock weighs about 3 tons. So a 1 kilometer diameter asteroid is going to have a mass of about 1.5 billion tons, or 1.5 trillion kilograms. Each one of those kilograms requires 150 megajoules to shift that asteroid from the asteroid belt to the Earth's orbit, requiring something like 2 and a heck of a lot of zeros joules of energy. So let's just use the entire energy consumption of mankind as a yardstick here. Now, by lucky chance, 2 and a heck of a lot of zeros, 20 in this case, is also how much energy mankind uses in an entire year. The entire planet's energy consumption is about 2 to the power of 20 joules. So if mankind were to devote the entire energy of 1 year, it could just about get a 1 kilometer asteroid into the Earth's orbit. So roughly what would be the cost of that? Well, we know that we spend about 1/10 of our wealth generating power, and we know the GDP of the planet is about $100 trillion, something like that. So that means that just the cost of the energy would be about $10 trillion. A little bit more expensive than one of the world's most expensive skyscrapers, like, say, for instance, the Freedom Tower, which cost about $4 billion. But don't worry, these people have thought this through. They've got a great way to save money. And this bit just beggars belief, is they say that they're going to save money by doing the construction in the Middle East because the construction costs will be cheaper.
Same time. So the company has even come to define where the construction of the megastructure would be made, and that would be Dubai.
Seriously, you get sites like Big Think with their titles of Get Smarter Faster Every Day, saying things like this. The advantage of making such a building, according to the architects, is that since it is built in the air, it can be constructed and transported anywhere. In fact, the firm is proposing to build it all over Dubai, where it can be built at 1/5 of what it would take in New York City. Newsflash, guys, you couldn't build this in Dubai if you wanted. In fact, the only sensible place you might be able to build this is at the equator, and Dubai is not on the equator. So you literally couldn't build it from Dubai. You would have to build it in space after they've spent something like $10 trillion to get an asteroid. And that's $10 trillion just for the asteroid. That's not including any of the construction costs or the costs for the cable. And the odd thing is, many of these people cite NASA's asteroid return mission.
Because NASA is planning an asteroid retrieval mission in 2021 that could determine whether such a feat is feasible.
Let's take a look at the Get Faster, Smarter, Big Think article on this. They point to some recent asteroid-related developments to bolster the feasibility of their plan. Manipulating asteroids is no longer relegated to science fiction. In 2015, the European Space Agency sparked a new round of investment in asteroid mining concerns by proving with its Rosetta mission that it's possible to rendezvous and land on a spinning comet. Yeah, that didn't quite go so well. NASA has scheduled an asteroid retrieval mission in 2020, which aims to prove the feasibility of capturing and relocating an asteroid. Not so much. They're looking at bringing back a kilo or so of asteroid, not 1 trillion kilograms. Then they tied up with, while the Analemma Tower is certainly speculative at this point, with some of the proposed technologies not yet available. It's still an exciting idea, straight out of the hopefully near future. And because they're obviously impressed by this sort of thing, here's another great picture of the tower over New York City. Munchkins. But whatever, I give you the asteroid for free. I give you the impossible materials to make it from for free. Cool, so you want to hang this building from an asteroid and then dip it into the atmosphere from some asteroid in geostationary orbit. So geostationary orbit is the one where you go around the Earth once per 24 hours. So if you're on the equator in a geostationary orbit, that means you're over the exact same place on Earth for the whole time. And here, the radius of the geostationary orbit to the Earth's size is about right. Now, if that's where they were going to park their asteroid, they would save themselves a lot of problems. But no, they wanted to go around the Earth once per day in a geostationary orbit at an elevated angle, just so it can float majestically over New York City. But this means that it'll more or less track a line of longitude. So here's our geostationary satellite, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a second satellite also in a geostationary orbit and increase the elevation of that orbit. Now what's amazing is this means that your skyscraper will fly over New York City once per day. However, there is a slight drawback to this plan, and that's that the skyscraper has to get up to about 40 degrees of latitude. That's 4,000 kilometers from the equator, meaning that it has to go 4,000 kilometers below the equator for the round trip. So that means it's going to do about 8,000 kilometers in 12 hours. Even if you just take the average speed that the building's moving at, 8,000 kilometers in 12 hours, you're looking at 600 kilometers per hour, about 400 miles per hour average, which wouldn't be such a chore until you realize the movement's more in a sine wave, which gives you a maximum velocity of this building through the atmosphere somewhere around the speed of sound. Yeah, I think you might have structural and atmospheric drag problems on this idea. But that's nothing, because you will reach the peak speed at somewhere around the equator. And guess what? The Andes are at about the equator, meaning that the building that soared majestically over New York would smash even more majestically into the Andes at about the speed of sound. Yeah, that's kind of brown trousers time, especially in a building with no toilets. Look, this whole thing is basically a variant on the space elevator, which would be tethered to a single spot on the equator. I mean, rather than actually sort of putting a building on the end of the cable, you just attach the cable to the ground and use it as a space elevator. There is just a tiny problem that the materials don't exist that could possibly do the job yet. Look, as cables get longer, they get heavier, and eventually they just break under their own weight. I mean, we've kind of hit that limit already, just with elevators in regular buildings.
In the world's highest rising elevator, there are 6.5 miles of cables weighing almost 30 tons. Because of this weight, this elevator is approaching the practical limit of how far elevators can go.
So theoretical maximum for things like titanium cables is something like 30 kilometers. And maybe with carbon nanotubes, you can do better. But they have the slight disadvantage that we can only make them a few centimeters long and not in any significant quantity. But if you could make cables out of them, it may be possible to make a cable that would do this. But it's right on the limit of what's possible. That is, if these materials are as strong as they are predicted to be, and we can make them, which is probably something that's never going to happen. It's not just that you need a material that's this strong. You need that material to be made in one perfect fiber, 35,000 kilometers long. And any defect anywhere may cause the cable to break. Or any damage or wear on that cable may cause it to break. Because even with the theoretical projections of materials that don't even exist yet, it's only just possible to hang just the cable. And that's just for the cable holding its own weight. Never mind putting a giant ass skyscraper on the bottom of the cable and having it dragged through the atmosphere at about the speed of sound. But there were literally hundreds of articles written on this, all taken in by the same absolutely bogus computer-generated pictures, and some even pathetic generated pictures like these. And this junk was reported everywhere. And even people putting spins on it like, yeah, but building this impossible skyscraper's got some great advantages, like...
But at least you'd be getting almost 45 minutes of extra daylight. The project already has a name, the Analemma Tower.
Yeah, because if you have a really stupid project, it needs a fancy name. I think when I finally get around to making my solid gold hammer, simply because it's a really stupid and expensive way of making a really bad hammer, I'll give it a fancy name. You know, Analemma's got kind of a ring to it. And if you like this media, you can support this channel directly through Patreon. And I'd be very grateful to have you as a supporter. Because just so you know, this channel hasn't escaped the recent wave of demonetizations by YouTube. With two of the most baffling videos that were flagged as being too edgy for YouTube being Fukushima Beyond Urgent Busted and Fox News Atheists Shouldn't Have Rights. Seriously, I'll leave the links below so you can watch these videos for yourself. And you tell me, even at a stretch, what is actually edgy or offensive about these videos, yet those were determined by YouTube to be too edgy for monetization.